Next up, we're going to welcome StateStreet and Baillie Gifford. Baillie Gifford manages about 200 billion pounds in AUM. StateStreet is one of the world's largest custodian, as you guys all know. These are not crypto firms. These are traditional financial players. Tonight, they're going to talk about, how they're thinking about getting into crypto, understanding the market, and invest in 2026. With that, let's welcome our guests from StateStreet and Baillie Gifford. Thank you.
Right, as you can probably tell, Angus had a train to catch. So we've got the delightful Kim. Yeah, to many an upgrade. Brief introductions. I'm Theo Golden. I lead the tokenization digital asset works at Baillie Gifford, and I'm an investment manager. I run one of our credit portfolios. We're a $300 billion asset manager based in the UK, one of the last independent asset managers based here. And we've been around for about 120 years, very active manager. We were the first firm to tokenize a fully native tokenized fund in Europe, and have been in this space for a while. I'm very grateful to be joined by my friend and peer, Kim, so I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you very much, Theo. I'm Kim Hochfeld. I work at StateStreet Investment Management. We're the fourth largest global asset manager by AUM. We have about $5.7 trillion worth of AUM. And my role is to run our digital efforts as well as our cash business. So it's the confluence of these two strands that's brought me here tonight, and how Theo and I have interacted, and with many of you. We have announced the launch of a tokenized liquidity fund that will go live in the next couple of months. So that is our first tokenized product, hopefully the first of many. And Theo and I are going to talk a little bit about that journey and why we're both thinking about tokenization and bringing that to our very TradFi institutions and to our very traditional investor bases.
Yes, and I think it's worth saying that both of us come very much through the traditional route. Kim was very much managing the cash business. I was running a traditional book. And what's been remarkable is, in a small space of time, relatively in the stories of our institutions, we've moved very fast into the digital world. So I guess maybe to start to pretend, Kim, what does it take to convince people in our sort of world that tokenization not only is worth it, but it is actually better?
It's a long conversation, as I'm sure you've had. Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, and I feel very fortunate that there were a few believers at the top of the house, both at StateStreet Bank, as one of the world's largest custodians, as well as StateStreet Investment Management, that weren't scared by the word tokenization. And I'm always very careful internally to talk about DLT technology and tokenization and digital assets writ large, and keeping the word cryptocurrency and Bitcoin out of the conversation. So many traditional financial institutions labor under the perception that anything to do with on-chain finance equals money laundering and problems. So this conversation, and I'm sure you're going to have similar war stories here, has had to be nurtured and navigated with care and with ease. But I think the major sort of mic drop moment for us at StateStreet Investment Management was realizing that bringing assets on chain was going to open up whole new distribution channels for us. So my day job is very much driving flow into our cash franchise. And when I understood how tokenization and putting cash on chain could bring a whole new investor base to the firm, that's what got me excited. And it was selling that vision to the C-suite that helped contextualize what blockchain technology could do for a very traditional financial services firm. So we're very careful to think about tokenization as a wrapper and a new way of distributing product, very traditional product. And then we also think about allowing investors exposure to this new emerging asset class. So no, we don't have a Bitcoin ETF yet, and that space is now quite crowded and fairly mature, perhaps more in the US. But I have to take my hat off to BlackRock, because they launched the most successful ETF ever with IBIT in the US, took in 100 billion of flow in the first 12 months. I mean, everybody who's in the asset management space has to stop and look at that and go, we need to understand this more, because real money is to be made there. So in the end result, we run by our shareholders. Shareholders want to see the share price going up. Shareholders look around them and see other asset managers benefiting from this new emerging asset class and this new emerging technology. And then the question is, how do we tap into that?
Yeah, I mean, on the IBIT side, you've also got to give some respect to Jane Street, who managed to get that much flow done over in that time horizon. But yeah, so on the Baillie Gifford side, we're a slightly quirky organization in many ways. We're privately owned. We're owned by 55 partners who work within the business. We're an unlimited liability partnership, so if something goes wrong, they will lose their houses. And so we are fundamentally a firm with that structure. We're able to take risk on a kind of a high conviction, long-term horizon basis. So even when the Biden administration was in administration in the US and crypto was kind of a bit of a dirty word, we were working through the processes of getting tokenization view through in the internal governance. We built that conviction, and we were lucky to have a partnership who understood that really through both personal anecdotes and also kind of actually running a business, that there is friction that can be taken out of the system, and there is extraction which is not necessary. And so we got the first this fully native fund tokenized in December 24, the first in Europe. And the reason we partially did that, to Kim's point, there was a component about distribution. There was a component about, let's go find this buyer base who is underserved, and let's get high quality product into their hands that they can use, and so they are not buying bad quality product in a way which then people start to doubt the technology. Because the technology is good, but there are always bad actors in any cycle of innovation. And the second component was the current financial system is relatively clunky in many places, and there are points of issues, particularly around human error. And so when we did the first fund that we did, we focused on what's called an on-chain books and records, because we decided that our own transfer agency system was good, but could be improved by just simply saying, the blockchain is right, we trust the blockchain, therefore it is the source of truth. And once you put that proposition in front of your internal operations team, and they go, oh, hang on a sec, we've seen a mark-to-mark issue, we've seen, we know how scared we are that we might have to repost the NAV because we got it wrong. Goodness, well, we could actually just automate this process. This is the dream of unitization and full automation on steroids embedded in code. You start to win round a very conservative-leaning organization to a very, very, what other people externally might see as a high-risk technology. And that was the journey that we took. The last thing really to say is around, and I think Kim would definitely, this will chime with you, which is like, we have a duty to our buyer base, our ownership structure, but ultimately we are bound by a fiduciary duty, and that is our biggest motivator. And ultimately, there are lots of things that sit in the stack where there is fee extraction, which means that we are fulfilling our fiduciary duty, but we're not always necessarily getting the best end financial outcome for a client, because they've had to pay somebody else a fee in the time that it's taken to get to them. And for us, tokenization is a bit of a reset of that relationship. It's a time to go, how do we get product into people's hands where they actually have true ownership, and they're not having to make decisions, or they're forced, we remove their optionality. And for us, it's a chance to really reset that relationship with clients and do it in the right way, in the honorable way. The next place I wanted to go is to briefly talk about, because in tokenization, people often talk about kind of catering to the crypto market, which is obviously really important, but like the reason why we're so excited about Solana and its ability to be the future of internet capital markets is also like, you're thinking about how do institutions like ourselves come and buy some money product, and how do we use it? Why is that important to us? So just to briefly touch on that, money market funds are a highly liquid thing. But when I go and post collateral, I send cash to somebody else who buys a money market for me, takes 50 bips of the net interest margin, and then posts it in the collateral network, right? That's an incredibly inefficient process with counterparty risk, and guess what? I'm losing out on 50 basis points, which I could have given to my clients. And so this is why when products like Kim's that comes to market, we get very excited as professional asset managers because we go, wow, our process can suddenly become more efficient. So I don't know, Kim, on that kind of collateral piece, which is quite a boring piece of financial infrastructure, but how are you thinking about, sweep improving both outcomes but also efficiency for your current book more broadly?
I'm going to steal a statistic that Ami was talking about earlier. Apparently, there's a NASDAQ report out saying most institutional players can save up to $340 million a year in terms of balance sheet efficiency by moving on chain. So just allowing collateral to be posted and received 24/7 atomically in a programmable way allows institutions like ours to hold less cash, idle cash on our balance sheet. So this is really talking about replumbing the traditional financial services infrastructure. And yes, this whole movement started very differently in the crypto DeFi space, but the technology itself is such a huge enabler in how large financial organizations are going to be managing their balance sheet with some real savings to be made, which is why you're seeing this big transition and adoption of DLT in firms and banks like our own.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting on our side is that you're starting to see also a professionalization of balance sheets from crypto companies as well. So, people thinking, why am I holding stables which aren't yielding? Can I professionalize my balance sheet? Can I have tier 1, tier 2 assets? Can I become more Basel III compliant, etc.? That's really tricky when you've got friction costs coming off chain. Well, fantastic, you've got a tokenized money market fund, you've got tier 2 assets coming online in within the next 12 months. That starts to, and that's when you start to pick up this positive flywheel, which is that crypto companies are the first adopters. They are always the innovators. They prove the product market fit. They prove the utility. And then guess what? A CFO at a sleepy S&P 500 company goes, oh, damn, I'm probably not doing the best job I could. And that's how you start to pick up. FOMO is a very powerful thing, particularly within the very sleepy world of CFOs.
But isn't it interesting how some of the DAOs are picking up the Basel III capital structure in terms of how they're managing their own balance sheet? So there is this reciprocity of ideas, and really interesting that Basel III, which is often feels a bit like a millstone around our neck, is being adopted by some of the DAOs in the DeFi ecosystem. So we'll take imitation as the best form of flattery, right?
And I think the other thing to point out is also around the DeFi angle, right? Is we're also, I've been in crypto for about 10 years. I've lost more money than I'd like to admit in DeFi. But that's where I think we also start to see institutions like ourselves start to dip our toes in real utility. Posting collateral in borrow lend is just basically like tri-party repo, but it's more efficient. And I think we're starting to see lots of people get more comfortable with the reality that, some of the regulation around TA, et cetera, is going to have to get comfortable with the fact that DeFi is just better at doing stuff that we're currently doing. And therefore, if we adopt it, we are in the first instance being defensive, but in the second instance being offensive in our approach to new product and coming to market. So I don't know, Kim, how you're thinking about DeFi more broadly and how that fits into Sweep, and whether it does at all, or where, in future what DeFi and TradFi's collaboration marriage might look like.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to tokenization as a wrapper. And for us, StateStreet Investment Management, some of you might know, actually invented the ETF wrapper just over 30 years ago. And if anybody knows much about ETFs or UCITS funds or mutual funds, the ETF wrapper has really displaced all other kinds of wrappers around investment solutions. And we've seen the rise of ETFs, particularly in the US market, but in Europe here as well, to the detriment of a mutual fund or a UCITS fund structure. And we're very much a firm believer that tokenization is going to be that next wave. Tokenization gives new utility to traditional products, and it allows those products to sit in wallets rather than in brokerage accounts. All of us know, I'm sure many of you, if not all of you in the room, access everything through your phone and through a wallet. Brokerage accounts are going to be a thing of the past, and certainly we as a product manufacturer in the asset management space know that we need to deliver a product in the way that investors need to access it. So this whole shift is coming. So again, we're looking at a very traditional business, a traditional way of managing traditional assets, but delivering them in a way where we meet investors where they are, which is clearly on-chain.
Yeah, I mean, there's a statistic which I quite like, which is that 40% of UK investors under 25 own only crypto or cash. So businesses like ours are in the wrong place. Right, so we need to meet them where the market is, and we kind of have a fiduciary duty to put product into their hand, which is going to diversify them. As much as I love crypto, you probably shouldn't have 100% of your portfolio in it. So I think there's that piece. The other piece to think about is also like where I get really excited about is, you know, we run a lot of OICs, we run a lot of mutual funds, which are quite archaic fund structures, but like we're moving to a world where vaults have proven product market fit in borrow lend, but really at their most pure form, they're just an open-ended fund structure. Well, guess what? If I have tokenized underlying securities like equities, etc., and I have a fully native vault system, well, why bother with the fund at all? I can just buy the underlying securities in the vault. I can do all of my pre- and post-trade compliance on chain. It can be automated. It's all visible. And it can be, you know, from our perspective, where we have big regulatory duties, well, there's no better transparency for a regulator than say, here's everything I did on chain today.
Yeah, it's this whole theme of mass personalization at scale. So, and I think every asset manager in the world is thinking about that carefully. So as we've seen the great wealth transfer, you know, the numbers are something like $85 to $100 trillion over the next 20 years, passing from one generation to the next. How do we deliver customized investment solutions at scale while still keeping our profit margins up? So, and tokenization and vaults and on-chain asset management allows us to do just that.
Completely, and just to leave you with one thought is, I don't know if you guys saw, but one of the AI companies, I can't remember which one, left some agents to talk to each other, and they ended up coming up with their own language, right? And I like to think about the fact that we're probably moving to a world where your wallet, I can see Soulflower here, your wallet probably has an agent or something sitting there doing your wealth management for you or something like that. You know, we're moving to a world where, you know, that value add is pretty commoditized. But I think there's also this factor, which is how are agents going to talk to each other without a common language? And for us to as humans to still have control, we certainly can't have them coming up with their own language. Well, what better language than an on-chain set of if-what statements, right? So we are rebuilding. There are multiple factors rebuilding, rewiring the financial system, how services are being done, and you know. Essentially, the plumbing that we are all sitting around here discussing and building is the backbone of that, and that's incredibly exciting. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.